Long before houses, streets, clocks, and quiet rooms, the human body lived inside a world that never stopped speaking. Darkness had meaning. Cold had meaning. Hunger, silence, footsteps, strange smells, and the movement of animals could all become messages. For most of our deep history, survival was not only a skill of the mind, it was something held in the skin, the breath, the muscles, and the nervous system. But modern life has softened many of those signals, and perhaps some ancient responses have become quieter than they once were. Did safety slowly change the way we listen to danger, need, and instinct? Why humans lost their ancient survival instincts? Most people now meet the world through layers of protection. A wall stands between the skin and the weather. A roof softens the sky. A locked door changes the meaning of night. Food waits in bright rooms, water comes through a pipe, and warmth can arrive with the turn of a hand. The body still breathes with an older rhythm, but the room around it has become very new. It is easy to forget how unusual this is. For most of human history, a body did not wake inside a sealed space made to keep danger outside. It woke inside a living landscape, where light, air, sound, hunger, cold, and the nearness of other people were not background details. They were information. The first moments after waking may have carried more meaning than many entire modern days. Was the fire still alive? Was the air colder than expected? Had the wind changed? Were the others near? Was there a sound that did not belong to the ordinary morning? None of these questions needed to be written down. They moved through the senses before they became thoughts. The human nervous system did not begin in offices, beds, vehicles, or quiet kitchens. It began in open places, in shifting weather, in groups that had to notice small changes because small changes could become large ones. A shape at the edge of vision might be nothing, or it might matter. A silence among birds might pass quickly, or it might make people pause. The body learned to live in that uncertainty, not as a dramatic state of fear, but as a steady kind of attention. Modern safety has not removed the ancient body. It has placed that body in a world where many old signals no longer need to be answered. The stomach can feel empty, but food is nearby. The skin can feel cold, but shelter is close. The ears can hear a sound at night, but the walls usually hold. The eyes can see darkness, yet a switch can make it disappear. These changes are gentle from day to day, but across generations they are enormous. They do not mean that humans became less human. They mean the conversation between body and environment changed. In a deep past measured not by calendars, but by seasons, births, deaths, migrations, droughts, storms, and remembered paths, survival depended on reading the world in ways that were practical and immediate. The body was not separate from that reading. Muscles carried the memory of distance. Feet learned ground through repeated steps. Skin knew the difference between dry cold and wet cold. Sleep itself may have been shaped by the nearness of others, by firelight, by darkness, and by the sounds beyond the sleeping place. When people today feel uneasy in a silent house, alert in darkness, restless when hungry, or strangely calmed by warmth and familiar voices, these feelings may not be random weaknesses. They may be traces of an older arrangement, where the body expected the world to speak and expected itself to listen. But the modern world often speaks in different ways. It uses clocks instead of sunrise, alarms instead of birds, screens instead of stars, labels instead of local knowledge, stored food instead of seasonal search. The senses still receive signals, yet many of those signals are filtered, softened, or replaced before they reach the old layers of attention. So the question is not whether ancient people were magically stronger, braver, or closer to nature. That would be too simple. The quieter question is what happens when a body shaped in one kind of world spends its life inside another. Perhaps some instincts fade because they are no longer practiced. Perhaps some remain, but appear in places where they no longer fit. Perhaps some are still waiting beneath comfort, not gone, only unused. And that quiet mismatch is where the story begins. To imagine the older world of human life, it helps to begin very quietly. Not with danger, not with a chase, not with a sudden animal in the dark, but with a small group of people waking near the edge of a landscape they knew only by living inside it. The ground beneath them was not a floor. The roof above them was not a ceiling. Around them were trees, grass, stone, water, insects, birds, wind, smoke, and the slow return of light. Nothing in that world was empty. Even stillness had a texture. A person opening their eyes did not only see morning. They entered a field of signs. The colour of the sky could suggest the coming weather. The smell of damp soil could speak of rain or nearby water. Ash from the fire could show whether warmth had lasted through the night. The sound of animals might reveal distance, movement, or absence. A track in soft ground could mean food had passed there, or that another creature had moved through the same place while people slept. These were not romantic details. They were the ordinary material of survival. For much of deep human history, people lived by noticing patterns that modern life often hides from us. A change in wind could matter because smell travelled with it. A broken branch could matter because something had weight enough to break it. A sudden quiet among birds might not mean danger every time, but it could be worth hearing. Hunger was not just a private discomfort. It belonged to the season, the path ahead, the energy left in the body, and the knowledge of where food had been found before. Cold was not just an unpleasant feeling. It could warn of exposure, wet clothing, poor shelter, dying fire, or the need to move closer to others. Darkness was not only the absence of light. It changed what the eyes could do and gave more work to the ears, the skin, and memory. This older way of living did not require humans to have perfect senses. It required them to practice attention every day. A child born into such a world would not learn survival from a single lesson. The learning would arrive slowly, through watching hands gather plants, through following older feet along familiar paths, through hearing which sounds made adults pause, through feeling which places were safe to sleep and which places were not. The body and the group taught together. One person might remember water, another might know the behaviour of an animal, another might notice weather, another might carry a story about a place where people should not stay too long. Survival, then, was not locked inside one person as a pure instinct. It moved between bodies, memories, senses, and the land itself. This matters because the beginning of human life was never only about strength. It was about relationship. The body listened to the environment, and the environment answered in small ways. A smell, a shadow, a change in temperature, a distant call, a pattern in the ground, a missing sound. Modern people still have bodies capable of attention, but the landscape around us has been rearranged. Many signals are no longer there, or they no longer carry the same cost. The old world did not need to shout to be heard. It only needed a body that had learned, over many mornings and many generations, that the world was always speaking. Ancient survival did not disappear from the human body like a light going out. It would be more truthful to imagine something slower, quieter, and harder to notice. A response that is not needed every day may become less practiced. A sense that is not trusted may become less useful. A warning that no longer leads to action may begin to feel like background noise. The body still has old systems for attention, fear, hunger, cold, closeness, fatigue, and sleep. But many of those systems were shaped in places where signals had immediate meaning. In the older world, a person could not always separate feeling from consequence. Tiredness could mean the body needed rest before a long walk, but it could also mean there was not enough food, not enough warmth, or too much strain on the group. Hunger could mean it was time to search, to remember, to share, or to wait. Unease at night could mean nothing more than a mind awake in darkness, but it could also make someone listen more carefully to the edge of the camp. In modern life, many of these feelings still rise, but the answers around them are different. Hunger can be answered by a package. Cold can be answered by a blanket or a heater. Darkness can be removed by light. A strange sound can be ignored because a door is locked. This does not make modern life false. It is one of the great achievements of human history that so many people can sleep through the night without listening for danger. But the achievement also changes the training ground of instinct. A survival response is not only inherited, it is also shaped by use, by childhood, by repeated experience, by what adults teach, and by what the environment demands. Early humans and later foraging communities did not survive because every person carried a perfect inner map of the world. They survived because bodies, minds, tools, elders, children, landscapes, and memory worked together. The old signals were repeated often enough to become familiar. A kind of attention was refreshed every morning. A person learned that the world could be generous, but not always. It could feed a group, but not without knowledge. It could shelter them, but not everywhere. It could look calm and still be changing. When a way of life continues across many generations, the young do not simply inherit genes. They inherit habits of noticing. They inherit what to fear, what to ignore, what to test, what to follow, what to remember. This is why the loss of ancient survival instincts cannot be understood as one simple loss inside the brain. It is also a change in the world around the brain. When people no longer have to read tracks, the skill weakens. When they no longer have to judge weather from the skin and sky, that judgment becomes less central. When food no longer depends on place, season, and shared memory, hunger becomes more private and less connected to land. When children grow up away from fire, soil, animals, darkness, rivers, and long walking, their senses still develop, but they develop inside a different arrangement. The ancient beginning of our species was not a pure state we should romanticize. It held danger, pain, loss, hunger, infection, and uncertainty. Yet it also trained the body to live in direct conversation with the living world. Modern shelter has quieted many of those conversations. Some instincts remain loud because they are deeply rooted. Others remain only as faint movements beneath ordinary life. A pause before entering darkness, a comfort in warmth, a need for familiar voices, a strange alertness when the room is silent. They may not be broken signals. They may be echoes of a world where listening was not optional. And before we can ask why they faded, we have to notice how slowly the world stopped asking for them. The word instinct can sound as if it belongs to something mysterious, something hidden deep inside the body and separate from thought. It can make survival seem like a secret force, as if ancient humans simply knew what to do because some perfect instruction lived inside them. But human survival was never that simple. The body does carry older patterns. A sudden sound can make the muscles tighten before the mind has time to explain it. A falling sensation can make the hands reach out. The smell of smoke can pull attention very quickly. The sight of a moving shape at the edge of vision can make the eyes return to it again and again. These reactions are real, but they are not the whole story. A body may turn toward a sound, but it still has to learn what the sound means. A person may feel hunger, but hunger alone does not reveal which route is safe, which animal path is fresh, or which season will bring fruit back to a familiar place. A child may fear darkness, but fear does not automatically teach the child where to sleep, how to keep close to others, or how to understand the noises beyond the firelight. This is why ancient survival should not be imagined as a magical gift. It was more like a long conversation between biology and experience. The nervous system gave humans quick attention, memory, emotion, caution, curiosity, and the ability to learn from pain and reward. The world gave repeated lessons. The group gave correction, warning, and example. Together, these shaped what people often call instinct. In the deep beginning of human life, the body did not act alone. It was surrounded by elders who had seen dry seasons, storms, animal migrations, illness, injury, birth, hunger, and recovery. It was surrounded by children learning slowly, not from written rules, but from living near the consequences of every choice. A young person could watch which plants were gathered and which were avoided. They could hear the tone in an adult voice when a place was unsafe. They could see how people moved when they approached water, how they carried fire, how they paused before entering unfamiliar ground. Over time, the body learned not only through fear, but through repetition. The hand learned the weight of a tool. The feet learned how stone, mud, sand, and dry grass each answered differently. The ear learned which night sounds belonged to ordinary life and which ones made the group become quiet. None of this required a modern classroom, but it did require teaching. It required attention. It required memory passed from body to body. That matters because when we ask why humans lost their ancient survival instincts, we are not asking why a single switch inside the brain turned off. We are asking what happens when the old partnership between body, landscape, and community is interrupted. A reflex may remain, but the skill around it may fade. The body may still startle, but it may no longer know how to read a forest. The nose may still notice smoke, but it may not know the difference between a cooking fire, a wildfire, wet ash, or a cold camp. The skin may still feel cold, but it may not know what that cold means for the next hour of walking, the next night of sleep, or the weakest person in the group. In this sense, instinct is not only ancient biology, it is biology shaped by use. It is an old capacity made sharper by daily need. Modern life has not erased the quick reactions of the human body, it has changed the lessons those reactions receive. And when the lessons change, the old responses may remain, but their meanings become less clear. Some reactions begin before thought has time to form. The eyelids close when something comes too close to the face. The hand pulls back from heat. The body freezes for a moment after a sudden sound. The stomach tightens when something smells spoiled. These are the quick movements of an animal body, and humans still carry them. They belong to biology that is older than language, older than tools, and older than the long story of our own species. But human survival was never built from reflex alone. A reflex can protect the eye, but it cannot tell a person where to find water after several dry days. A startle can turn the head toward a sound, but it cannot explain whether that sound is wind, a branch, an animal, or another human being moving nearby. A sense of disgust can make the body reject something rotten, but it cannot name every plant that heals, harms, feeds, or deceives. The deeper human advantage came from the way quick reactions were joined to learning. A body felt first, then memory, observation, and social knowledge gave that feeling direction. In the ancient beginning of human life, this difference mattered every day. A child might naturally avoid pain, but would still need years to learn which stones cut well, which fires burn too fast, which paths become dangerous after rain, and which signs in the sky suggest a change in weather. The body might fear isolation, but the child had to learn who in the group knew the old water places, who understood animal behavior, who remembered where food had been found in a previous season. What we call survival instinct was therefore layered. At the deepest layer were automatic responses: flinching, grasping, startling, seeking warmth, avoiding falling, reacting to pain, turning toward movement. Above that were learned patterns, built by repeated contact with the world. A person learned how far a sound could travel in cold air, how wet ground held a footprint, how smoke behaved when wind shifted, how fatigue changed judgment after a long walk. Above that was cultural knowledge, held by the group and passed across generations. Where to camp, when to move, which plants to test carefully, how to treat fire, how to share food, how to recognize places that had been dangerous before. These layers did not compete with each other. They worked together. Biology opened the door, experience filled the room, community kept the memory alive after one body was gone. This is why the loss of ancient survival instincts is not simply a story about weak modern bodies. It is a story about broken layers. The reflex may survive while the skill disappears. The feeling may remain while the meaning becomes unclear. Someone today may still feel uneasy in darkness, but without a life spent outdoors, that unease may not become useful knowledge about sound, distance, shelter, fire, and group safety. Someone may still feel hunger sharply, but without seasonal searching, hunger may no longer connect the body to land, weather, and shared memory. Someone may still notice a sudden smell, but without practice, the smell may not become a readable message about water, rot, smoke, animals, or danger. Ancient people were not born knowing all of this. They became capable through a slow education that began before words and continued through daily life. Their bodies reacted, but their world taught those reactions what to do. Over many generations, survival depended on keeping those layers connected. When the environment changed, when shelter grew stronger, when food became stored, when artificial light softened the night, and when children learned more from symbols than from soil, many old reactions stayed inside the body, but the older training around them became thinner. What faded was not only instinct, it was the living practice that once made instinct useful. Human beings did not survive the ancient world by instinct alone, and they did not survive by intelligence alone either. Their strength came from the joining of many quiet things. A body that could feel cold before danger became serious. Eyes that could notice movement without fully understanding it yet. Hands that could learn from tools. Feet that could remember a path. A mind that could compare today with yesterday. And a group that could remember far more than any one person could carry alone. This is what made human survival different. A deer may run with great speed. A wolf may smell and hear in ways humans cannot. A bird may read the air with a body shaped for flight. Humans were never the best animal at every single sense. Our ancient advantage was not perfection. It was connection. A small warning in the body could be joined to observation. Observation could be joined to memory. Memory could be joined to language, gesture, imitation, and teaching. Over time, a group could build a way of living that no newborn child possessed at birth, but every child could slowly enter. This is why it is misleading to imagine ancient people as wild bodies guided by pure instinct. They were careful learners. They watched the land, they watched each other. They learned what happened when someone ignored a sign, and they learned what happened when someone listened. In a foraging life, knowledge was not separate from the body. It was carried in posture, timing, touch, smell, and movement. A person did not merely know that a stone tool was useful. The hand knew the pressure needed to hold it. The arm knew the angle. The eye knew when an edge was becoming dull. A person did not merely know that weather could change. The skin felt dampness. The nose caught the smell of rain. The ear heard wind moving differently through trees or grass. These forms of knowledge were not always spoken clearly, yet they were deeply learned. They lived in the space between sensation and understanding. The same was true for danger. A person might not see a predator, or a stranger, or a sudden storm, but a pattern could feel wrong because it did not match the remembered order of a place. Too few bird calls, tracks where tracks were not expected, smoke where no known fire should be, a group moving more quietly than usual. These were not supernatural powers. They were the result of living close enough to the environment for small differences to become meaningful. Ancient survival was also social. No single person could know everything. One body could grow tired. One memory could fail. One pair of eyes could miss a sign. But a group could divide attention. Someone watched children. Someone tended fire. Someone remembered a route. Someone knew plants. Someone noticed illness. Someone had lived through a dry year before. In this way, survival instinct was partly distributed among people. It was not locked inside the skull. It moved through the group like a shared nervous system, held together by trust, habit, warning, and care. This may be one of the most important things to understand before asking what modern humans lost. We did not simply lose sharp teeth, stronger muscles, or some hidden animal sense. We changed the conditions that once joined body, landscape, and community into one working system. The modern body still reacts. It still startles, hungers, seeks warmth, feels loneliness, notices faces, and becomes uneasy when something seems wrong. But often those reactions no longer lead into the old chain of learning. A sound at night may lead to irritation rather than careful listening. Hunger may lead to convenience rather than memory of season and place. Cold may lead to a thermostat rather than attention to shelter, movement, and shared heat. The ancient body remains, but many of the old conversations have been interrupted. And when a conversation is interrupted for long enough, even a voice that once guided survival can become faint. Cold is one of the oldest languages the human body ever learned. Long before a person could name temperature with numbers, the skin already knew when the air had changed. A small wind across damp clothing could mean more than discomfort. A colder patch of ground could change the way a body rested. Breath turning pale in the morning air could tell people something about the night just past, and perhaps the night still coming. In the ancient world, cold was not only a feeling, it was information arriving through the skin, the lungs, the hands, the feet, and the quiet stiffness of tired muscles. A person did not have to think in clear words to know that wet cold was different from dry cold, that wind could take warmth quickly, or that sitting still too long after sunset could make the body weaker. These lessons were not learned from books. They were repeated through seasons, through sleep, through hunger, through walking, and through watching what happened to those who ignored them. In a modern room, Cold is often reduced to a number on a wall, or a setting on a machine, or the quick decision to pull a blanket higher. But for much of human history, cold belonged to shelter, fire, clothing, movement, food, and the safety of the group. It was never alone. If the air grew colder than expected, the question was not only how the skin felt, the question was whether there was enough fuel, whether the sleeping place was dry, whether children and older people were warm enough, whether the body had eaten enough to keep making heat, whether the wind had shifted, whether morning would bring frost, rain, or harder walking. Cold connected the body to the whole arrangement of survival. This connection reaches far back into the human story. Our ancestors lived through changing climates, moving across landscapes that could be warm, dry, wet, windy, seasonal, or harshly cold depending on place and time. They did not all live in ice, and it would be wrong to imagine one single ancient environment for all people. But wherever humans lived, the body had to notice temperature because temperature shaped energy. It shaped sleep. It shaped distance. It shaped the need for fire, covering, shade, shelter, and closeness. A colder night could make a group choose a different place to rest. A cold wind could change how people sat around a fire. A wet garment or animal skin could become a problem if warmth could not return. Even tools and materials were part of this quiet equation. Wood, stone, hide, fibre, ash, and earth all answered temperature differently. The body learned those answers by touch. Hands knew when fingers were losing ease. Feet knew when ground pulled warmth away. Shoulders knew when tension was becoming fatigue. The face felt wind first. The breath felt air before the mind measured it. This is why cold was a teacher of attention. It made people aware of edges, the edge between firelight and darkness, dry ground and wet ground, shelter and exposure, movement and exhaustion, comfort and risk. The human body did not need to be heroic to learn this. It needed only to live where cold still mattered. A child growing up in such a world would learn the meaning of cold slowly. They might first know it as shivering, then as the desire to move closer to someone warm, then as the warning in an adult's voice when clouds gathered or the wind changed. Over years, the feeling would become joined to memory. This kind of learning does not vanish easily, but it can become quieter when the world no longer asks for it every night. Modern people still feel cold, but often we do not have to read it deeply. The ancient body once listened because it had to. Cold did not only press against ancient skin, it asked for decisions. A person who felt cold had to understand why the body was losing warmth, and what could still be done before weakness spread too far. The answer might be movement, it might be fire, it might be dry covering, it might be changing the sleeping place, closing the space between bodies, eating if food was available, or waiting for light with as little waste of energy as possible. In that older world, cold was not a single problem. It was a chain. Air touched the skin spoke to the body measured its own strength, and the group had to answer together. This made cold one of the clearest examples of how survival instinct was never only a feeling. Shivering, for example, is a body trying to make heat, but shivering does not decide where to find dry wood. It does not know whether a shelter is blocking wind well enough. It does not know whether a child is becoming too quiet, or whether an older person needs to be moved closer to the fire. The instinctive response begins inside muscle and nerve, but survival depends on what surrounds that response. The body feels the warning. Experience gives it shape. In deep human history, warmth was connected to many things at once. Fire mattered, but fire was not simply a glowing center. It required fuel, tending, protection from rain, knowledge of materials, and people who understood how to keep it useful through changing weather. Shelter mattered, but shelter was not always a solid wall. It could be a rock overhang, a windbreak, a cave entrance, a stand of trees, a hollow in the ground, hides, branches, or the careful use of landscape. Clothing and covering mattered, but they depended on tools, animal skins, plant fibers, sewing, scraping, drying, and repair. Food mattered because the body needs energy to produce heat. A hungry body in cold air does not face the night in the same way as a fed body. Sleep mattered because a sleeping person cannot watch the fire, adjust covering, or notice small changes as easily. So cold tied together the practical world and the inner world of the body. It made survival a matter of timing. Move too little, and the body might lose warmth. Move too much, and energy could be wasted. Stay in a poor place, and wind or dampness might do slow damage. Leave too late, and darkness could make the next choice harder. These were not dramatic lessons. They were ordinary pressures repeated across generations. The ancient body learned to treat cold as a message about the whole situation. It was not just the question, am I uncomfortable? It was the question, what is changing around us? Is the fire failing? Is the ground wet? Is the wind stronger? Is someone moving less? Is the group close enough? Is morning far away? This kind of attention would have been especially important because human bodies are not covered in thick fur like many cold-adapted animals. Humans relied heavily on behavior, tools, fire, shelter, and social cooperation to manage many environments. That reliance became part of our way of surviving. We did not simply endure cold as isolated bodies. We organized around it. We gathered closer. We built and repaired. We carried knowledge forward. We noticed who was vulnerable. Cold taught humans that the body alone was not enough, and that feeling a warning was only the beginning. In modern life, the warning often stops at comfort. We feel cold and we cover ourselves. We turn on heat. We close a window. The chain is shortened. The skin still speaks, but the old network of meanings has grown quieter. Once, cold could tell a human where they stood in relation to fire, food, shelter, weather, distance, sleep, and one another. It was discomfort, but it was also instruction. When warmth became easier to control, one of the oldest teachers of the human body became quieter. This did not happen all at once. It happened through many layers of human invention, each one gentle by itself, each one changing the way the skin listened to the world. A thicker covering, a better shelter, a more reliable fire. Later, a house with walls that held back wind. Later still, clothing made far from the hands that wore it, heating that arrived without gathering wood, beds lifted from the ground, windows sealed against rain, and rooms where winter could be kept at a distance. These changes protected human life. They reduced suffering. They helped children, elders, the sick, and the tired survive nights that would once have demanded constant care. There is no need to turn the ancient cold into something beautiful. Cold could hurt. Cold could weaken. Cold could make hunger worse and sleep more fragile. But because it mattered so much, it trained attention. It made people ask questions through the body. Is the ground dry enough? Is the fire still strong? Is the wind entering from one side? Is the covering enough? Is someone shivering too long? Is the night colder than the last one? In a modern room, many of those questions are answered before they fully appear. The body feels a chill, and almost at once there is a blanket, a jacket, a heater, a closed door. The old chain of awareness becomes shorter. Cold no longer has to lead the mind outward into weather, fuel, shelter, group care, and the slow reading of night. It can remain a private discomfort, solved inside a private space. This is one way an ancient survival instinct can fade without disappearing. The skin still notices temperature, the muscles still tighten, the body still shivers if warmth falls far enough, yet the meaning around those signals has changed. A person may feel cold and think only of comfort, not of distance, energy, dampness, fuel, or the weakest member of a sleeping group. The signal survives, but its world has been reduced. Across deep time, human beings were shaped by environments where survival depended heavily on behavior. We did not grow thick fur again. We did not become animals that could sleep uncovered through every climate. Instead, humans used fire, tools, shelters, clothing, shared warmth and memory. These were not separate from the body. They became the human way of answering the body. In that older arrangement, cold was part of a conversation between biology and culture. The body warned, and the group responded. The skin spoke, and memory supplied an answer. The night changed, and people changed with it. Modern safety has broken much of that rhythm, not because it is bad, but because it is effective. A good wall does not need your skin to judge the wind. A thermostat does not ask you to read the sky. A stored blanket does not require you to understand the behavior of animal hide, dry grass, smoke, ash, or earth. The body still lives, but many old lessons no longer repeat. This may be why cold can feel strangely simple now. It is unpleasant, but often not meaningful. It interrupts us, but rarely instructs us. Yet beneath that simplicity, something older remains. The comfort of shared warmth, the unease of damp cold, the relief of firelight or a warm room after darkness. The way the body loosens when it feels protected from wind. These are small reminders that human survival once began very close to the skin. Long before cold became a setting on a machine, it was a language of energy, danger, care, and time. And as that language grew quieter, one more ancient instinct did not vanish but learned to speak less often. Hunger is one of the simplest feelings in the body, and one of the oldest. It begins quietly as emptiness, pressure, weakness, restlessness, or a small narrowing of attention. In modern life, hunger often points toward a kitchen, a shop, a package, a refrigerator, or a meal already planned by the clock. The feeling may be uncomfortable, but the answer is usually close. For most of human history, hunger did not work that way. It was not only a message from the stomach. It was a map beginning inside the body and spreading outward into the land. To feel hungry was to be reminded of distance, season, memory, weather, group needs, and the uncertain movement of other living things. The body did not simply ask for food. It asked where food might be, how far away it was, how much energy the search would cost, who needed food first, and whether the same place that fed people before could feed them again. In that older world, hunger joined the inner life of the body to the outer life of the environment. A person might feel the body growing light and tired, but that feeling had to become a question about the world. Were fruits ripe yet? Had animals moved through the valley? Had rain changed the plants? Was there water nearby? Were roots still good in the ground? Had another group passed through? Was the day too hot to travel far? Was a child too tired to continue? Hunger carried all of these quiet questions because food was not separate from place. It was held in trees, grasses, rivers, shorelines, burrows, tracks, nests, seasons, and remembered paths. This does not mean ancient people were always starving. That would be too simple, and not true for all places or all times. Human foraging lives varied widely, depending on climate, ecology, skill, population, and season. Some environments could be generous at certain times, others could become difficult very quickly. But in nearly every setting, food required attention. Even when food was available, it still had to be recognized, gathered, prepared, shared, carried, protected, and remembered. Hunger was therefore not just lack, it was instruction. It told the body to measure itself against the landscape. A hungry person had to consider strength. Walking costs energy, digging costs energy. Hunting, tracking, climbing, carrying, cutting, cracking, cooking, and waiting all cost energy. The body had to decide, often without any perfect certainty, whether the search would be worth the cost. This made hunger a teacher of judgment. Too much urgency could waste strength. Too much delay could make the body weaker. A group had to balance the needs of children, adults, elders, pregnant women, injured people, and those who could travel farther. The feeling inside one's stomach belonged to many bodies. It belonged to the whole camp, the whole path, and sometimes the memory of earlier seasons. In the ancient beginning of human life, survival was never only about finding food once. It was about learning the patterns by which food returned, disappeared, changed, or became dangerous. Some foods needed cooking. Some needed careful preparation. Some were useful only at certain times. Some signs in the landscape were easy to miss unless someone had been taught to see them. The body felt hunger, but culture taught hunger where to look. An elder's memory might hold the place where water remained after dry weeks. A child might learn that a certain bird call meant fruit nearby, or that certain tracks meant an animal had passed before dawn. A person might remember a tree, a slope, a wet hollow, a shell bed, or a patch of ground that mattered only during one narrow season. Hunger made these memories valuable. It sharpened attention because attention could become food. In modern life, hunger still speaks, but often in a much smaller room. It may tell us that we want something, but not where the season has turned. It may pull our thoughts toward taste, habit, or convenience, but not toward distance, weather, soil, tracks, or shared memory. The ancient signal remains inside us. What has changed is the map around it. To follow hunger in the ancient world was to follow signs. Food was rarely just waiting as a finished thing. It had to be noticed before it could be taken. A patch of green after rain, a cluster of shells at low tide, the movement of birds toward fruiting trees, the soft turning of soil where roots might be found, the broken stem, the fresh track, the smell of water, the sound of insects, the place where animals returned again and again. These were not separate details. They formed a quiet pattern that the hungry body had to learn. The stomach could begin the search, but the eyes, ears, nose, hands, feet, memory, and group knowledge had to carry it forward. This was one reason survival in the deep human past depended so strongly on attention. Food was part of the landscape, and the landscape changed. A place that gave food one month might give little the next. A tree that mattered in one season might be useless in another. A shoreline could open at low water and close again. A herd could pass through, then vanish beyond hills or grassland. Rain could bring growth, but it could also change paths, hide tracks, or make travel harder. Dryness could concentrate animals near water, but it could also make the search more dangerous. Hunger, therefore, trained people to remember time, not only place. It asked the mind to hold the shape of the year. Where did people find food when the mornings were cold? Where did they go when water shrank? Which plants appeared after rain? Which ones had to be avoided unless prepared carefully? Which animals left signs that could be followed, and which ones were too costly to pursue? These questions were not answered by instinct alone. They were learned slowly, from those who had lived longer and seen more cycles pass. A child might first see only a plant, a track, or a bird. An adult might see a season beginning to turn. The difference was memory. The beginning of human survival was built on this difference between seeing and understanding. Many animals search for food with powerful senses, but human beings added social memory to the search. They carried stories of places. They taught by gesture, by warning, by repetition, by sharing success and failure. Someone might remember that a certain hollow held water longer than the open ground. Someone might know that a nut had to be cracked a certain way, or that a bitter taste did not always mean uselessness if the food was processed. Someone might recognize that an animal path was old, not fresh. Someone might know from experience that it was better to wait, turn back, or move with the group rather than spend precious strength alone. Hunger made these judgments valuable because every choice had a cost. To walk toward possible food was also to spend the very energy food was meant to restore. To carry food back required strength. To prepare it required time, tools, fire, or shared labor. To eat the wrong thing could bring sickness. To take too much from one place could change what was available later. Ancient hunger was therefore not a simple command to consume. It was a pressure that pulled the body into relationship with land, season, danger, and community. Modern hunger often feels much more private. It can arrive while a person is sitting still, surrounded by food systems too large and distant to see. The body still sends its old message, but the search has been shortened. We no longer need to read fruiting trees, animal movement, weather, soil, shorelines, or the memory of elders in order to answer it. The ancient signal remains, but much of the world that once taught us how to understand it has moved out of reach. When food became easier to reach, hunger did not disappear. It became simpler. The old feeling remained inside the body, but the world around it changed. Instead of pointing toward a hillside, a riverbank, a grove of trees, an animal trail, a fire, a memory, or a shared journey, hunger began to point toward stored food, planted fields, markets, kitchens, shops, and eventually machines that keep food cold or warm at any hour. This change was one of the great turns in human history. It protected people from some kinds of uncertainty. It allowed larger communities to grow. It made it possible to store harvests, plan seasons, feed children more predictably, and survive times when wild foods were harder to find. But it also changed what hunger meant to the nervous system. A signal that once opened outward into land and season could now be answered nearby. The body still asked for energy, but the answer no longer required the same kind of reading. In the deep past, to be hungry was often to ask where the world was generous right now. In many modern settings, to be hungry is often to ask what is available right now. Those questions sound similar, but they train the body differently. One requires attention to weather, movement, soil, animals, plants, water, memory, and group decision. The other can often be solved by reaching, buying, opening, heating, or choosing. The ancient map grows smaller. This does not mean modern food is unnatural in a simple way. Human beings have always used tools to transform food. Fire, cutting stones, digging sticks, containers, grinding stones, drying, cooking, sharing, and storing are all part of the long human story. The change is not that humans began to use culture. We were already cultural creatures. The change is that food became less tied to immediate perception. A person could eat grain from a field they did not walk, meat from an animal they never saw, fruit from a season happening somewhere far away, or a meal prepared through systems too large for the senses to follow. Hunger stayed close. The food system moved far away. This distance matters because ancient survival instinct was trained by connection. The body felt hunger, then the eyes searched, the feet moved, the hands gathered, the group remembered, the landscape answered. Each step refreshed a relationship between need and world. When that relationship becomes indirect, the old signal loses many of its older meanings. Hunger may still create urgency, but it may not teach patience with season. It may still pull attention, but not toward tracks, ripeness, water, or the memory of elders. It may still make the body restless, but the restlessness has fewer paths to follow. There is another quiet change as well. In the ancient world, hunger often belonged to the group. One person's hunger could not be fully separated from the hunger of children, elders, the injured, the pregnant, the skilled hunter, the careful gatherer, or the person who remembered where food might be found. Food was social because survival was social. To eat was often to share, to divide, to wait, to carry, to prepare, and sometimes to accept less so that others could have enough. Modern hunger can still be social around a table, but it can also become isolated inside individual choice. The body feels an old need, while the answer may come through a private container, a private schedule, a private craving. Something ancient is narrowed. The signal has not failed. It is still doing what bodies must do. It reminds us that life depends on energy, but the deep map that once surrounded that reminder has faded from everyday use. Hunger used to speak about place, season, risk, memory, and belonging. Now it often speaks mostly about appetite, habit, and access. The ancient instinct is still there in the pull of the stomach and the sharpening of attention. What has been lost is much of the world that once taught hunger how to guide us. For most of human life, night was not empty. It was a different world. When the sun went down, the landscape did not disappear. It changed its language. Shapes lost their edges. Distance became harder to judge. A familiar path could become uncertain. The eyes gave less, and the rest of the body had to listen more. A small sound could travel farther than expected. A movement in grass could be wind, an animal, or nothing at all. Firelight could make a circle of warmth and visibility, but beyond that circle, the world remained open. Darkness was not always danger, yet it always changed the terms of survival. The human body had to understand that change. In modern life, darkness is often treated as a temporary inconvenience. A switch, a lamp, a phone screen, a streetlight, a passing car, a glowing clock, and the night becomes less night than it once was. We can walk through rooms without waiting for our eyes. We can keep working after sunset. We can eat, read, move, and speak as if daylight has simply been extended. But the ancient body was shaped in a world where darkness placed limits on action. It slowed travel. It narrowed vision. It made familiar ground less certain. It made people more aware of one another, of fire, of shelter, of sound, and of the boundary between the known and the unknown. This did not mean every night was filled with fear. Many nights may have been ordinary, quiet, social, and restful. People spoke, watched embers, cared for children, repaired tools, slept near others, and let the body settle. But even calm darkness carried information. The absence of a usual sound could matter. The direction of wind could matter. The behavior of animals near the sleeping place could matter. A person did not need to panic to become attentive. The older kind of alertness was often slow and practical, woven into the rhythm of evening. When sight became weaker, other systems carried more weight. The ears listened for distance and direction. The skin felt wind, cold, dampness, and the nearness of other bodies. Memory held the shape of the ground that the eyes could no longer see clearly. Smell could reveal smoke, water, rot, animals, or weather. The group itself became a kind of safety. One person waking, turning, or becoming still could change the attention of others. In this way, darkness joined biology to social life. It reminded people that a body alone in the night was different from a body near a fire, near voices, near breathing, near shared warmth. The beginning of human life was deeply tied to such limits. Before electric light, before walls that could seal out the world, before night became bright enough to ignore, humans had to negotiate with darkness rather than erase it. They learned when to move and when not to move. They learned which sounds belonged to ordinary night and which ones deserved a pause. They learned that not seeing clearly did not mean knowing nothing. It meant knowing differently. This is important because survival instinct is not only about sudden danger. It is also about restraint. Darkness taught the body to slow down, to listen, to stay close, to remember where it was, and to respect uncertainty. Modern light has given human beings great safety and freedom. It has also softened one of the oldest lessons the nervous system once received every evening. The body still feels something when a room goes dark. The mind still changes when vision fades. A quiet house at night can still make hearing sharper for a moment. These small responses may be echoes of an older world, where darkness was not just the absence of light, but a living condition that asked the whole body to pay attention. When darkness reduced sight, the human body did not become helpless. It changed the way it gathered the world. The ears began to matter more. So did memory. So did the feeling of ground under the feet, the smell of smoke, the direction of wind, the warmth of others nearby, and the quiet knowledge of where the body had been before sunset. In daylight, a person could scan the distance with the eyes and correct a mistake quickly. At night, the same person had to rely on a slower kind of knowing. A path remembered by walking it many times, a slope felt through the legs, a tree recognized by its outline against the sky, a stream found by sound before it was seen. The ancient body did not read darkness by sight alone, it read it through the whole nervous system. This was not a magical ability. It was the result of repeated practice in a world where night could not be erased. If someone moved after dark, they had to move differently. Steps became shorter. The body lowered itself without needing to be told. The hands might reach out before the eyes were sure. The ears might separate near sounds from far sounds, familiar sounds from strange ones, ordinary night movement from something that deserved caution. The mind carried a map built during the day, then tested it in darkness. Where was the fire? Where was the edge of the shelter? Where were the children sleeping? Where did the ground drop? Where was the water? Where were the others? These questions lived partly in memory and partly in the body. A person did not need to name every detail to feel oriented. They knew because they had moved there, rested there, watched there, and listened there before. In the deep beginning of human life, this kind of night knowledge would have been important because darkness narrowed certainty. Human eyes can adapt to low light, but they do not turn night into day. So survival depended on combining limited vision with other signals. The crack of wood in a fire could reveal whether it was burning well or failing. The rhythm of insects could make the night feel normal, while sudden changes might draw attention. The smell of smoke could show wind direction. The sound of breathing nearby could confirm the closeness of the group. A voice, even a quiet one, could place another person in space. The body learned that darkness was not only outside the eyes, it was also a test of belonging. Being near others changed what night felt like. The same sound heard alone might be different when heard among familiar bodies. The same cold might be easier near shared warmth. The same uncertainty might be softened by knowing someone else was awake, listening or tending fire. This is why ancient survival instinct cannot be separated from social life. Night attention was not just individual alertness. It was distributed across people, fire, memory, and place. One person did not have to listen forever. A group could share sleep and wakefulness, even if the exact patterns varied across cultures and environments. What mattered was the old relationship between darkness and cooperation. Modern life has changed that relationship. We still use hearing, memory, smell, and touch in the dark, but often only briefly, until light returns. A phone screen opens. A lamp turns on. A hallway glows. The body no longer has to remain inside uncertainty long enough to learn its details. Because of this, the old night skills become thinner. We may still feel alert in darkness, but the alertness often has nowhere to go. It does not become tracking, orientation, fire care, group listening, or slow movement through known ground. It becomes impatience, unease, or the simple wish to make the dark disappear. Yet somewhere under that wish, the ancient pattern remains. When vision fades, the body still reaches for sound, memory, closeness, and place. It is still trying, quietly, to know the world without seeing all of it. Artificial light did not only brighten the night, it changed what night was allowed to do to the human body. A small flame, an ember, or moonlight could soften darkness, but they did not erase it. They left edges. They left distance, uncertain. They left the body aware that beyond the circle of light, the world continued in its own way. Electric light is different. It can make a room ignore sunset. It can make streets glow long after the sky has gone dark. It can let people work, travel, eat, read, and stare into bright surfaces while the older body is still carrying rhythms shaped by daylight and night. This is one of the quietest changes in human history, because it feels so ordinary now. We enter a room, touch a switch, and the ancient limit disappears. But the limit was part of how the nervous system learned. Darkness once told the body to slow down, gather close, listen more carefully, and measure movement with caution. Light now often tells the body that the day can continue. The eyes keep receiving signals, the mind keeps processing. The body may be tired, but the environment does not always agree. In the deep past, night did not always mean sleep at once, and human sleep itself may have been more flexible than the modern ideal of one sealed block in a silent room. People could wake, listen, tend fire, shift position, care for children, speak quietly, or rest again. But even with variation, darkness still had authority. It reduced visibility. It changed the temperature. It placed limits on distance. It made the group, fire, shelter, and memory more important. Modern lighting weakens that authority. It gives enormous safety, but it also removes many of the old cues that once told the body where it was in time. The beginning of human life was tied to a sky that changed slowly, not to a ceiling that could shine at midnight. Dawn arrived with gradual color. Evening arrived with fading detail. Shadows lengthened. Animals changed their sounds. Air cooled. Firelight became more important. These transitions gave the body a sequence. They helped arrange attention. They told people when to move outward and when to draw inward. Today, the transition is often broken. Day can be extended indoors. Night can be filled with screens. Darkness can be delayed until the moment a person chooses to sleep, and even then, small lights remain everywhere. Under these conditions, the old relationship between night and instinct becomes confused. A person may feel tired but not ready, safe but restless, surrounded by light yet strangely uneasy when it finally goes out. The body still has older responses to darkness, but darkness no longer arrives in the same way. It no longer teaches patience through long evenings. It no longer makes listening useful for hours. It no longer places the same value on familiar voices, shared warmth, fire, and the slow confidence of knowing a place without seeing it clearly. Instead, Darkness often becomes either something removed or something feared in small private moments. A room goes dark and the mind briefly sharpens. A hallway at night feels different from the same hallway at noon. A sudden sound can still seem larger when vision is low. These are not signs that the body is foolish. They are signs that the old system has not fully disappeared. It is still there, trying to respond to a condition that modern life usually interrupts before it can become meaningful. Artificial light has helped human beings live longer, safer, and more freely. It has protected cities, extended work, improved care, and reduced many dangers of night movement. But it has also made one ancient teacher less present. Darkness once trained the body to respect limits. It taught the eyes humility. It gave memory more work. It made sound deeper. It made closeness matter. When humans learned to push back the night with light, we did not lose those old responses immediately. We simply stopped needing them in the same daily way. And over time, what is not needed every evening becomes harder to hear. Before signs became written, before maps were drawn, before warnings could be printed on a wall, the human body lived inside a world of small messages. Many of them were not seen clearly. They were heard, smelled, touched, or felt as a change in the air, a branch breaking somewhere beyond the sleeping place, the faint smell of smoke carried by wind, the sourness of rotting food, the damp scent of water hidden by trees, the uneven rhythm of footsteps, the marks left by hooves, paws, hands, or dragging weight in soft ground. These were quiet signals, but they could matter. In the older world, survival often depended on noticing what had changed before the change became obvious. A person did not always need to see an animal to know one had passed. A footprint, broken grass, disturbed soil, a dropping, a smell, or a sudden movement of birds could begin the thought. A person did not always need to see fire to know smoke was near. The nose could receive the message first. A person did not always need to see water to move toward it. The sound of insects, the shape of vegetation, cooler air in a hollow, or the memory of a path could guide the body before the eyes confirmed anything. This kind of attention was not dramatic. It was slow, practical, and repeated across ordinary days. Modern life often teaches people to trust clear labels more than faint signs. A road sign tells where to turn. A phone shows the weather. A package says whether something is food. A screen gives a map. A warning sound comes from a machine. These tools are useful, and they have protected human life in countless ways, but they also replace a type of reading that once belonged directly to the senses. In deep human history, the world rarely explained itself in direct language. It had to be interpreted. The smell of smoke might mean warmth, cooking, a nearby group, a dying fire, or danger from burning land. The sound of water might mean safety, but also insects, animals, difficult crossing, or the presence of others. A track might mean food, but also risk, distance, and uncertainty. One signal could open several possibilities, and the body had to hold them gently without rushing to one answer. That is one reason ancient survival instincts were tied so closely to experience. The ear could hear a sound, but memory gave it meaning. The nose could notice a smell, but knowledge decided whether it mattered. The eye could see a mark in the ground, but only repeated learning could tell whether it was fresh, old, useful, or misleading. The beginning of human life was lived in this kind of partial knowledge. People did not have perfect certainty, but they had practice. They compared one sign with another, a track with the direction of wind, a smell with the time of day, a sound with the behavior of birds, a broken branch with the softness of soil. The body gathered pieces, and the group helped arrange them. Someone older might notice what a child missed. Someone who had walked that place before might remember whether animals often passed there. Someone who had smelled that kind of smoke before might understand whether the fire was close or far. In this way, smell, sound, and trace were not lesser forms of knowledge. They were part of the living intelligence of survival. They allowed humans to sense the world indirectly, through what had happened just before, or what might happen next. Many modern spaces are different. The air is cleaned, sealed, scented, or filled with exhaust. The ground is paved, swept, or covered. Animal signs are rare. Water is hidden in pipes. Fire, is hidden in systems. Food is wrapped and distant from its origins. Sound is crowded by engines, machines, music, voices, and alerts. The senses still work, but the old messages are often buried beneath newer ones. And when the world no longer offers the same signs every day, the body has fewer chances to learn how to read them. A sound is only useful when someone knows how to hear it. A smell is only useful when memory can place it in the world. A mark in the ground is only useful when experience can say what may have made it, how long ago, and whether it matters now. This is why ancient survival was never just a matter of sharper senses. Human eyes, ears, noses, and hands received the world, but meaning came from practice. A child could hear the same branch snap as an adult and feel only surprise. The adult might hear distance, weight, direction, and possibility. The difference was not magic. It was a long education built from repetition, correction, and living close to consequence. In the older human world, people learned signs by watching other people respond to them. A child might notice that adults did not react to every sound. Wind could move leaves. Small animals could disturb grass. Fire could shift and crack. Ordinary night had its own noises, but sometimes a sound changed the shape of attention. Someone lifted their head. Someone stopped speaking. Someone listened before moving. The child learned not only the sound, but the pause that followed it. That pause was part of the teaching. It showed that the world could carry messages that were not obvious at first. Smell worked in a similar way. Smoke could mean comfort, cooking, warmth, or another group nearby. It could also mean a fire moving through dry land, or embers that needed care before sleep. Rot could mean spoiled food, but it could also lead attention toward death, insects, water, or animals. A sweet smell might suggest fruit, flowers, fermentation, or something not yet understood. The nose received the signal, but the group carried its meaning. The same was true of tracks and traces. A footprint was not only a shape, it belonged to mud, sand, dust, snow, damp soil, dry ground, slope, sun, rain, and time. A mark could be fresh in one place and unreadable in another. A track could promise food, but also warn of an animal too large, too distant, or too dangerous to follow. To read it well, a person needed more than sight. They needed memory of weather, knowledge of animals, and the patience to compare one sign with another. The beginning of human life was filled with this kind of layered attention. People did not live as isolated brains collecting facts. They lived in groups where knowledge moved through gesture, imitation, story, warning, and shared work. Someone pointed without speaking. Someone showed a child how to touch a plant, smell it, break it, or avoid it. Someone explained that a sound heard at one season did not mean the same thing at another. Someone remembered that a place where animals gathered during dry weather could become empty after heavy rain. These lessons were not separate from survival instinct. They shaped it. The body learned which signals deserved calm, which deserved caution, and which deserved action. Over years, the senses became tied to a local world. A person did not learn a universal forest, a universal plain, or a universal shoreline. They learned the places their people moved through. They learned familiar water, familiar winds, familiar animal paths, familiar plants, familiar dangers. This is one reason modern humans can still possess the same basic senses, yet feel far less able to read a natural environment. The organs remain, but the library of meanings may be thin. Without repeated contact, a sound stays only a sound. A smell stays only pleasant or unpleasant. A footprint stays only a mark. The ancient skill was not hidden in one sudden instinct. It was built where body, memory, land, and community touched again and again. When that contact becomes rare, the senses do not vanish. They simply receive fewer lessons from the world that once trained them. Modern spaces are full of signals, but many of them are no longer the old signals. A person walking through a city hears engines, phones, voices, doors, music, machines, alarms, and the low continuous sound of systems working in the background. The air may carry fuel, soap, perfume, plastic, cooking from far away, dust, cleaning chemicals, or nothing at all because the room has been sealed and filtered. The ground is hard, flat, paved, swept, and often unreadable. Water is hidden behind metal and walls. Fire is hidden inside wires, pipes, stoves, and distant power plants. Food arrives wrapped, labelled, transported, cooled, and prepared by chains of people the body never sees. The senses still receive information, but much of it points toward a human-made system rather than a living landscape. This is a deep change. In an older world, the sound of water could lead a thirsty person toward a stream. The smell of smoke could place a fire in the wind. The marks in mud could show that animals, people, or weather had passed through. The sound of birds or insects could belong to a particular place and time. In a modern world, a sound may come from a machine whose source is hidden. A smell may be manufactured. A light may warn, invite, sell, decorate, or distract. A sign may tell the mind what to do before the body has read anything for itself. None of this is simply bad. Modern signals keep people safe in ways ancient signals could not. Traffic lights, labels, maps, warnings, clocks, weather forecasts, medical alerts, and emergency sirens are powerful tools. They have saved many lives. But they also train attention differently. They teach the mind to wait for clear instruction, not to compare faint traces. They teach the eyes to look for written meaning, not for disturbed ground, changed wind, or the behavior of animals. They teach the ears to sort through noise, not to listen into quiet. Over time, the older skill of reading small natural signs becomes less necessary, and what is less necessary is practiced less. The beginning of human life was shaped in places where information was not simplified for us. A person had to hold uncertainty. A smell might mean several things. A sound might matter or might not. A mark in the soil might be fresh or old. The body had to gather pieces and wait before deciding. Modern life often removes that waiting. It gives answers quickly. The map tells the route. The label names the food. The forecast names the weather. The alarm names the danger. This speed is useful, but it changes the relationship between instinct and world. The body still has the capacity to notice. It can still become alert when something feels wrong. It can still turn toward a sound, pause at a smell, or feel uneasy in an unfamiliar place. But in many modern settings, these reactions are surrounded by noise and replacement signals. The ancient response rises, then has nowhere clear to go. A person hears something at night, but it may be plumbing, a refrigerator, a car, a neighbour, or wind against a window. A person smells smoke, but it may be food, exhaust, a candle, a distant fire, or a machine. A person feels that a place is strange, but the old method of reading land, tracks, air, animals, and group behaviour has little material to work with. The instinct has not vanished. It is trying to speak inside a world that speaks over it. This may be one reason modern people can feel both overstimulated and strangely disconnected. The senses are busy, but not always grounded. The body receives more signals than ever, yet fewer of them return it to soil, weather, fire, water, animals, and shared local memory. Ancient survival instincts grew in a world where signs were tied closely to consequence. Modern signs are often tied to systems too large to feel directly. And as the older messages are replaced by lights, screens, labels, engines, and alarms, the body keeps listening, but the language around it has changed. A human body alone is a fragile thing. It can run, carry, climb, remember, make tools, and endure pain, but it was never built to face the ancient world by itself for very long. The deeper strength of humans was not only in muscle or teeth or speed, it was in closeness. A person could hear only so much, see only so far, stay awake only so long, and remember only one lifetime. A group could do more. A group could watch while others slept. A group could share food when one person failed to find it. A group could carry a child, protect the injured, care for the sick, warn of danger, hold memory across generations, and turn many small abilities into one larger way of surviving. This is why ancient survival instincts were never only private signals inside the body. They were also social signals. The need to stay near familiar people, the fear of being left behind, the comfort of voices, the careful reading of faces, the tension when trust breaks, the relief when someone returns safely. All of these belong to the old human story. In the beginning of our species, survival was not a solitary contest between one body and the wilderness. It was a shared arrangement between bodies, landscape, tools, fire, memory, and care. A person who noticed danger could warn others. A person who knew a water source could guide others. A person who was too weak to travel quickly could still carry knowledge, watch children, repair tools, or remember seasons. A child survived not because it had strong instincts on its own, but because adults and older children surrounded it with attention. An elder survived not only because the body remained strong, but because the group could protect experience that still had value. This social world shaped the nervous system. To be accepted mattered. To be trusted mattered. To recognize anger, fear, calm, grief, confidence, or hesitation in another person mattered. A face, a gesture, a change in voice, or a sudden silence could carry important information. The group itself became an environment that had to be read as carefully as weather or tracks. Who was tired? Who was afraid? Who knew the path? Who had eaten? Who had seen something unusual? Who was missing? These were not abstract social concerns. They were practical survival questions. Modern life often separates these signals from their original weight. A person can live among thousands of strangers and still feel lonely. A person can be surrounded by messages and still lack the kind of closeness the ancient body expects. A person can be safe in a locked room and still feel uneasy when cut off from familiar voices. This is not because the body is confused without reason. It may be because for most of human history, being alone was not just a mood. It was a condition with real consequences. Isolation could mean no shared watch, no help with injury, no protection for sleep, no exchange of food, no correction from older knowledge, no one to notice if something went wrong. The body learned to treat belonging as part of safety. That instinct has not disappeared. It still appears in the way people seek eye contact, listen for tone, gather around warmth, calm down near trusted bodies, or feel distress when excluded. But modern society gives these old instincts a difficult setting. The group is larger, more anonymous, more changeable, and often less physically present. We may depend on systems instead of people we know by face. We may receive help from institutions, machines, money, screens, roads, hospitals, and supply chains. These are powerful forms of protection, but they do not always speak the emotional language the ancient body understands. The older body still asks, who is near? Who is safe? Who will notice? Who will share the night? And sometimes the modern world answers with noise, distance, and names we never learn. Trust was once a survival sense. It did not look like hearing or smell, but it worked beside them. A person had to know which voices meant safety, which hands could be relied on, who noticed danger early, who remembered the path, who might share food, who understood fire, who could calm a frightened child, and who became careless when tired. These judgments were not always spoken. They lived in repeated experience. A face seen every morning, a voice heard in the dark, a hand that returned with food, a person who warned others before danger came too close. Over time, the body learned the shape of reliability. It learned that some people made the world feel steadier, while others made it more uncertain. In the ancient beginning of human life, this mattered because survival was not only about finding food or avoiding predators. It was also about knowing whom to follow, whom to listen to, and whom to sleep near when night came. A group could only protect its members if attention moved through it clearly. One person might see a track, another might smell smoke, another might hear a sound beyond the fire, another might remember that a certain place had brought trouble before. The warning had to travel from body to body. If trust failed, information could fail with it. A danger noticed by one person had to be believed by others quickly enough to matter. A path remembered by an elder had to be valued by younger bodies strong enough to walk it. A warning about weather, water, illness, or animals had to pass through the group without being ignored. This is where social instinct becomes a form of survival intelligence. Humans learn not only to read landscapes, but to read each other. A lowered voice, a tightened face, a sudden stillness, a gesture toward the distance, the way someone looked back while walking, the way a group became quiet together. These were signals as real as tracks or wind. They told the body whether the social field was calm, tense, divided, focused, or afraid. Modern people still read these signals every day, often without thinking. We notice tone before words. We feel when a room changes. We sense when someone is angry, uncertain, distracted, or calm. But in the ancient world, such reading may have been tied more directly to immediate survival. If the person beside you was afraid, it might be useful to know why. If the group became still, the body had reason to listen. If an experienced person hesitated before crossing open ground, that hesitation carried knowledge. The old nervous system did not treat other people as decoration. It treated them as part of the environment. This is why exclusion can still hurt so deeply. To a modern mind, being left out may seem like an emotional problem. To an older body, being outside the circle could once mean losing information, protection, warmth, food, and memory. The fear of rejection, the need to belong, the comfort of familiar faces, and the pain of being ignored may all carry traces of a time when social life and physical survival were tightly joined. In that older world, the safest person was not always the strongest. It might be the one who knew the route, the one who stayed calm, the one who shared, the one who watched carefully, the one whose memory protected others from repeating a mistake. Ancient survival instinct, therefore, included a deep attention to people, not just whether they were friendly, but whether they could be trusted when weather changed. Food was scarce, children were crying, night was near, or danger had not yet shown itself clearly. Modern society still depends on trust, but often at a distance. We trust systems, names, rules, passwords, institutions, roads, labels, schedules, and strangers whose faces we never learn. These forms of trust are powerful, but they are different from the old trust of voices around a fire. The body still searches for that older certainty. It listens for tone. It watches eyes. It asks quietly, who knows the way, who will notice, who will stay close if the dark becomes difficult. Modern life has stretched the human group into shapes the ancient body may not fully understand. A person can depend on thousands of people and know almost none of their faces. Food may arrive through farmers, drivers, sellers, machines, roads, fuel, warehouses, rules, and money. Warmth may come through power lines and systems hidden behind walls. Safety may come from locks, laws, phones, hospitals, insurance, police, buildings, and numbers stored somewhere far away. In one sense, the modern group is larger than anything ancient humans could have imagined. In another sense, it can feel strangely thin. The body may be protected by systems, yet still miss the older feeling of known people nearby. This is one of the quiet mismatches in the story of lost survival instincts. The ancient social world was not perfect, and it should not be turned into a dream of harmony. Small groups could have conflict, loss, fear, jealousy, injury, scarcity, and difficult decisions. But social life was immediate. A person knew who slept close, who shared food, who was ill, who had walked too far, who had skill with stone, who remembered water, who cared for children, who tended fire, who became angry, who could be trusted in a storm. The group was not an abstract idea. It was the circle of bodies around which daily survival was organized. Modern society often replaces that circle with networks too large to feel. We may receive help without knowing the helper. We may be surrounded by people without belonging to them. We may hear many voices in a day and still not feel that any of them would notice if we disappeared from the path. The old nervous system listens for closeness, but the modern world often gives connection through distance. Messages can arrive instantly, yet the body may still long for tone, touch, breathing, warmth, and shared attention. This does not mean technology is false. It means it answers some needs better than others. A screen can carry words, but it cannot fully replace the old safety of being seen by familiar eyes in the same dark. A city can protect a person with rules and structures, but it does not always give the body the slow certainty of a small group that knows one another's habits. Ancient survival instinct was shaped around presence. Who is beside me? Who is watching? Who hears what I hear? Who knows this place? Who remembers what happened before? In modern life, those questions often become harder to answer. We may know more information than our ancestors ever could, but less about the people physically near us. We may have maps of the world, but not know the person in the next room. We may be safer from many ancient dangers, yet more alone in the way our bodies read safety. This changes how social instinct appears. The desire to belong can become anxiety. The need to be seen can become restlessness. The old fear of exclusion can move into workplaces, families, public spaces, and even silent rooms where no real danger is present. The body reacts as if social distance still carries the weight it once carried, because for most of human time it often did. Being outside the group could mean losing information, food, warmth, protection, and memory. Today, a person may survive physically without close daily community, but the nervous system may not fully accept that new arrangement. It still looks for signs of trust. It still relaxes near familiar voices. It still feels steadier when someone notices. So perhaps one ancient instinct has not been lost at all. It has been displaced. The need for a group remains, but the group has become larger, stranger, more hidden, and less tangible. The ancient body still asks a very old question in every new place. Who is with me? A human child is born unfinished in a very particular way. The body can breathe, cry, grip, seek warmth, and turn toward care. But it cannot survive alone. It does not arrive with a full map of plants, animals, water, fire, weather, tools, danger, or safe sleep. It must be taught by the world, and by other people, for many years. This long childhood is one of the quiet foundations of human survival. In the ancient beginning of our species, a child did not learn life as a separate subject. There was no clear border between learning and living. The child learned by being near adults and older children, by watching what hands did, by hearing the tone of warning, by feeling when the group slowed down, by seeing which places were approached carefully and which were used with ease. Survival entered the body slowly through repetition. A child watched someone gather a plant again and again before understanding why that plant mattered. They saw fire tended, not once, but through many evenings. They felt how people arranged themselves near warmth. They noticed that some sounds were ignored, while others made adults pause. They learned that the same ground could be safe in one season and difficult in another. These lessons were not always explained in words. Much of them arrived through nearness. A child's eyes followed older bodies moving through a landscape that had already been read by many lives before. The beginning of human life was therefore deeply observational. The young learned not only facts but rhythms, when to be quiet, when to stay close, when to watch, when to wait, when to copy, when to ask, when not to touch. The hand learned the feel of materials before the mind could describe them. Stone, bark, bone, hide, water, ash, soil, grass, and cooked food, each had their own texture and meaning. Feet learned uneven ground. Ears learned familiar voices. The skin learned heat, cold, smoke, dampness, and the comfort of being close to others at night. This kind of education was slow because the world itself was slow. Seasons returned, but not every day. Certain foods appeared only at certain times. Certain risks became clear only after weather changed. A child had to remain inside the living pattern long enough for the pattern to settle into memory. Ancient survival instincts, then, were never simply placed inside the child at birth. The child carried the capacity to learn them. The group and the land gave that capacity shape. This is why childhood mattered so much. The young human brain is built for imitation, attention to faces, attachment, curiosity, play, and learning from others. Those abilities are ancient tools of survival. Play could rehearse movement, balance, chasing, hiding, carrying, throwing, and social rules. Curiosity could lead a child to explore, while fear and adult correction kept exploration from becoming too dangerous. Attachment kept the child near those who knew more. The need to belong made teaching possible. In this way, the child's dependence was not only a weakness, it was the doorway through which culture entered the body. Modern childhood is still full of learning, but the surroundings have changed. Many children learn from books, screens, classrooms, schedules, and protected spaces, far from the daily contact with soil, fire, animals, weather, long walking, hunger, darkness, and the slow work of gathering. This does not make modern children less intelligent. It means their intelligence is trained by a different world. The ancient child learned survival by living beside its sources. The modern child often learns safety through rules and symbols before direct experience. The older instincts may still be present as curiosity, caution, imitation, fear of separation, and comfort in familiar care. But the world that once turned those instincts into practical survival knowledge is less often under the child's feet. The skills of ancient survival were not learned quickly because the world itself did not reveal everything. Quickly, a child could not understand a plant by seeing it once. The same plant might look different when young, dry, flowering, broken, cooked, or growing in another place. A child could not understand water by being told that water was important. They had to learn where it gathered, how it sounded when hidden, how animals moved toward it, how mud changed around it, and how a dry season could make old knowledge more valuable than strong legs. Fire also required more than fascination. A child could watch flames and feel warmth, but the deeper lesson was slower. Which wood smoked too much, which fuel burned fast, which embers could be carried, how wind changed a fire, how close was safe, how ashes held heat after light had faded. These were practical skills, but they were also ways of training attention. The young body learned that survival was not one dramatic act. It was thousands of small recognitions, repeated until they became familiar. A stone was not just a stone. It could be weight, edge, tool, danger, memory, or waste, depending on shape and use. A path was not just open ground. It could be a route to food, water, shelter, other people, or risk. A sound was not just noise. It could belong to birds, insects, wind, animals, water, fire, or human movement. The child had to learn which differences mattered. This learning often began through imitation. An older person bent to examine something, and the child watched. Someone smelled a plant before touching it. Someone tested a branch before using it. Someone paused at tracks, then looked ahead, then looked at the sky, then changed direction. The child absorbed the pattern before fully understanding the reason. Over many years, the pattern became knowledge. In the ancient beginning of human life, such learning was not separate from play. Children likely explored, copied, carried small objects, practiced throwing, balanced on uneven ground, followed others, tested materials, and learned social rules through movement and interaction. Play did not need to be called training in order to train the body. It could teach timing, strength, patience, caution, cooperation, and the limits of the body. A child who learned how far they could jump also learned something about injury. A child who learned how a stick broke learned something about material. A child who followed older children learned something about distance and trust. These ordinary experiences built the quiet background of survival. Many important skills required long memory. Recognizing a safe plant was not only a matter of sight. It could involve smell, taste, season, preparation, and the words or gestures of people who had tested it before. Tracking an animal was not only following a mark, it meant understanding ground, weather, movement, freshness, and whether the effort was worth the energy. Finding shelter was not only seeing a dry place, it meant knowing wind, water, insects, cold, visibility, and the needs of the group. Tools required the same patience. A hand had to learn pressure, angle, sharpness, balance, and repair. These skills could not be born complete inside the child. They had to be shaped by repeated contact with the world. Modern life often removes children from many of those slow lessons, not out of failure but out of protection. A child may learn symbols for danger before touching heat, maps before walking long distances, names of animals before reading tracks, and weather forecasts before reading clouds. These are useful forms of learning, but they train a different relationship with the world. The ancient child learned survival through a body placed inside weather, ground, hunger, fire, darkness, tools, voices, and correction. The modern child often learns through explanation before experience. The capacity to learn remains ancient. What has changed is the classroom. When childhood moves away from the living world, ancient learning does not disappear, but it changes direction. The young brain is still curious. The hands still want to test. The eyes still follow movement. The body still learns from repetition, from imitation, from warning, from pain, from comfort, and from the nearness of trusted people. Those abilities are not modern inventions. They are part of the old human equipment. But the materials placed in front of the child have changed. Instead of soil, ash, bark, stone, animal tracks, fire, weather, and long paths, many children now meet smooth floors, closed rooms, bright screens, written instructions, scheduled lessons, plastic objects, controlled temperatures, and dangers explained before they are encountered. This protects them from many harms that ancient children could not avoid. It reduces injury, disease, hunger, exposure, and fear. Yet protection also narrows certain kinds of practice. A child who rarely walks on uneven ground has fewer chances to let the feet learn balance from stone, mud, slope, and roots. A child who rarely sits near his real fire has fewer chances to learn heat as distance, wind, fuel, ash, smoke, and care. A child who rarely watches animals closely has fewer chances to understand movement, caution, patience, and the difference between a living sign and a picture of one. A child who rarely knows darkness without electric light may not learn night as a slow change in sound, temperature, memory, and closeness. The instincts remain as capacities, but the lessons that once shaped them arrive less often. This is not a story of decline in a simple sense. Modern children learn many things ancient children never could. They learn symbols, numbers, machines, abstract rules, distant places, complex systems, and forms of safety that belong to a much larger world. Their brains are not weaker because they learn different things. The deeper question is what happens to the ancient layer when it is given fewer ancient materials. A child can still be cautious, but caution may attach itself to rules instead of direct signs. A child can still be curious, but curiosity may move through images before textures. A child can still imitate, but the models may be screens as much as older hands working nearby. A child can still belong, but belonging may be shaped by institutions, classrooms, and digital contact as much as by a small group moving through one landscape together. In the deep beginning of human life, learning was local. It happened in a place that could be touched. Knowledge had weight, smell, distance, and weather. Today, much knowledge arrives detached from place. A child can know the name of an animal without knowing its track, the idea of fire without smelling smoke in clothing, the word hunger without seeing how a season changes food, the word shelter without feeling why wind direction matters. These are not failures of the child. They are signs that the environment of learning has changed, and because survival instinct is sharpened by use, a changed childhood means a changed adult body. The adult may still feel uneasy in darkness, drawn to warmth, comforted by familiar voices, alert to sudden sounds, and curious about living things. But those feelings may not connect to practical knowledge in the old way. They may remain as moods, preferences, fears, or vague longings. Something that was once trained into skill becomes softer, less directed, less used. The ancient child learned by being absorbed into a world that demanded attention. The modern child is often protected from that demand, and then asked to live in systems the ancient body was never designed to understand easily. Perhaps this is why many people feel a quiet pull toward fire, forests, water, animals, stars, walking, and simple tools. It may not be nostalgia alone. It may be an old learning system recognizing the kinds of things that once taught it how to survive. A tool is one of the oldest ways the human body reached beyond itself. Long before metal, writing, wheels, or machines, there were stones held in the hand, sticks used for digging, sharp edges made by striking one material against another, fibers twisted into cord, hides scraped and shaped, bones worked into points, and fire carried carefully from one place to another. These things were not outside the human story. They were part of it from very deep in time. To be human was never only to have a body. It was to have a body that could join itself to objects, habits, and shared knowledge. A stone edge extended the hand, a digging stick extended the fingers, a container extended the arms. Fire extended the stomach, the skin, the night, and the range of foods the body could use. Shelter extended the body against weather, Clothing extended skin into a second surface. Tools did not make humans less natural. They were one of the ways humans became human. But every tool also changed the kind of attention the body needed. Before a sharp edge, teeth and nails had limits. After a sharp edge, cutting became possible in new ways. Before fire, many foods were harder to use or less safe. After fire, warmth, cooking, light, and protection changed the meaning of night and hunger. Before a shelter, the skin had to answer weather more directly. After shelter, wind and rain could be partly held away. Each invention solved a problem, but each solution also moved part of survival outside the body. This is not a weakness. It is the foundation of human adaptation. Other animals use tools too, but humans built whole ways of life around them, teaching them, improving them, carrying them, and depending on them across generations. In the ancient beginning of our species, a tool was not a convenience. It was memory made physical. A stone tool could hold the knowledge of how to strike, shape, grip, use, repair, and discard. A fire could hold the memory of fuel, wind, embers, distance, and care. A hide covering could hold the labour of hunting, cutting, scraping, drying, softening, stitching, and protecting. To use a tool well, the body had to learn it deeply. The hand learned pressure, the wrist learned angle, the eye learned shape, the ear learned the sound of stone breaking well or badly, the nose learned smoke, the skin learned heat through distance. In this sense, early tools did not silence instinct. They trained it differently. They made the body more capable, while also giving the body new things to rely on. This is where the story becomes quiet and important. A body that has a tool does not meet the world in the same way as a body without one. A person with fire does not listen to cold in the same way. A person with a cutting edge does not face animal, flesh, wood, fibre, or plant material in the same way. A person with a shelter does not feel wind in the same way. The body is still there, still sensing, still learning, but the tool stands between need and danger. It lengthens the time before danger reaches the skin. It gives the mind room to plan. It allows people to survive in places where the naked body alone would struggle. Over thousands and thousands of years, this became one of the deepest patterns of human life. We did not survive by returning to pure instinct. We survived by wrapping instinct in skill, material, fire, shelter, and teaching. The ancient survival system was never just inside the nervous system. It was spread across hands, tools, landscapes, and groups. And because tools became so successful, they also began a long movement away from direct contact. The better the tool, the less often the body had to face the raw problem alone. The old instinct remained, but it began to live beside extensions of itself. Every tool protects the body from something, but every tool also changes what the body must learn. A sharp stone protects the hand from tearing flesh or breaking hard material with bare fingers. A container protects the arms from carrying only what they can hold. A shelter protects the skin from wind, rain, and cold. Fire protects the stomach from some dangers in raw food, and protects the night from complete darkness. These protections made human life more possible, more flexible, and often more survivable. Yet each one also placed a layer between the senses and the world. The hand no longer met every surface directly. The skin no longer received every change in weather without help. The teeth no longer had to do all the work of breaking food. The eyes no longer faced every evening without firelight. The body was still active, but it was active through things. This is one of the great differences between human survival and simple animal endurance. Humans learned to survive by building a second body around the first one. That second body was made of stone, wood, hide, fibre, fire, shelter, memory, and shared technique. It allowed people to cross landscapes, remain warm, prepare food, carry children, store materials, and return to places with more than their own muscles. But as that second body became stronger, the first body met certain pressures less directly. This did not happen as a sudden loss. It was a slow shift in responsibility. When a cutting tool works well, the hand still needs skill, but the tool takes over the edge. When a shelter works well, the body still feels weather, but the wall takes over part of the wind. When fire burns well, The skin still knows cold, but warmth no longer depends only on the body's own heat. In deep human history, this was not a problem. It was a triumph of adaptation. Early tools still demanded close attention. A stone edge could break, fire could die, a covering could tear, a shelter could fail in rain, a container could leak. Because these tools were fragile, the body still had to understand the materials and the environment around them. The hand that used a tool also had to know when the tool was failing. The person who slept near a fire had to notice smoke, fuel, dampness, wind and embers. The person under a shelter still had to hear rain, feel cold ground, and understand whether the place was safe. Tools extended instinct, but they did not yet fully replace the need to read the world. Over long stretches of time, however, tools became more reliable, more complex, and more distant from the bodies using them. A modern person may use warmth without knowing fuel, eat food without knowing soil, move across land without reading distance, drink water without seeing its source, and sleep behind walls without understanding the night outside. The tool has become so effective that the old chain of attention can be skipped. This is where ancient survival instincts begin to grow quieter, not because the body is broken, but because the body is no longer asked to complete the same path from signal to action. Cold once led to fire, shelter, group closeness, food and judgment. Now it may lead only to a switch. Hunger once led to search, season, memory, sharing and risk. Now it may lead only to a door, a package or a payment. Darkness once led to listening, stillness, fire, care and closeness. Now it may lead only to a lamp. The tool shortens the distance between need and answer. That shorter distance is often merciful. It reduces suffering and makes life safer, but it also reduces practice. Ancient instincts were sharpened by traveling the full distance, from feeling to attention to interpretation to action to memory. When the answer arrives too quickly, the feeling remains, but the deeper lesson may not return. The body still carries old signals. The world simply no longer requires them to travel as far. The more powerful a tool becomes, the less visible the old work can be. A stone blade still shows the hand what it is doing. A fire still asks to be watched. A shelter made from branches, hide, earth or stone still lets the body feel wind, dampness, smoke, cold and repair. Early tools kept humans close to the problem they were solving. They helped the body, but they also reminded the body what the danger was. Modern tools often do something different. They hide the problem so well that the body may never meet it directly. Warmth arrives without fire. Food arrives without search. Water arrives without walking. Light arrives without flame. Distance disappears inside vehicles, roads, maps and engines. Weather becomes a forecast before it becomes a feeling on the skin. Safety becomes a lock, a wall, a policy, a signal, a number, a service, or a system. These inventions are not mistakes. They are part of the same human intelligence that once shaped stone and guarded embers, but their power changes the training of instinct. When a tool is simple, the body still has to understand the world around it. When a tool becomes complex and reliable, the body can stop asking many older questions. A person does not need to know where wind is coming from if the room is sealed. They do not need to know how wet ground steals warmth if the bed is raised and dry. They do not need to smell water in the air if water comes from a tap. They do not need to read animal movement if food is already stored, transported, and priced. The answer arrives before the ancient question is fully formed. In deep human history, survival was an active relationship. The body felt need, then moved outward into the world. It searched, tested, listened, repaired, learned, and remembered. Modern tools often reverse that movement. The world is brought inward, softened and prepared. Food comes to the shelf, heat comes to the room, light comes to the hand, direction comes to the screen. Knowledge comes as a result, not as a path walked through uncertainty. This makes life safer and easier in many ways, but it also means the body practices fewer old responses. The feet walk less uneven ground, the hands touch fewer raw materials, the skin judges less weather, the ear listens to less natural quiet. The nose reads fewer living signs, The mind holds fewer local maps because distant systems hold them instead. Ancient instinct does not vanish in such a world, but it may become misplaced. The body may still hunger, yet not know season. It may still feel cold, yet not know shelter. It may still feel uneasy at night, yet not know how to listen. It may still want belonging, yet live among systems more than familiar bodies. The tool has answered the need, but not always in the language the older nervous system expects. This is why comfort can sometimes feel strangely thin. A room may be warm, bright, safe, and full of food, yet the body may still search for something harder to name. Real darkness, real fire, real ground, real weather, real voices, real distance, real use of the hands. Such longings do not prove that ancient life was better. Ancient life carried dangers. Modern tools have mercifully reduced. They only suggest that the body remembers being trained by contact. It remembers that survival once involved effort shared with the world, not only service received from hidden systems. The ancient human did not live without tools. The ancient human lived with tools that still required attention. Modern tools are so successful that they often remove attention from the chain, and when attention is removed, the instinct that once followed it grows quiet. Perhaps humans did not lose their ancient survival instincts because tools made them weak. Perhaps tools became so strong that many instincts were no longer called by name each day. There was another great change in the human story, quieter than fire in the hand, but just as deep. Some humans began to stay longer in one place. They planted, tended, harvested, stored, guarded, and returned to the same fields across seasons. This did not happen everywhere at once, and it did not happen in one simple way. For many people, foraging, herding, fishing, gathering, and farming overlapped for long periods. Human life has always been more varied than a single path. But wherever agriculture and settled villages took hold, the old relationship between body and survival began to shift. The land was no longer only searched, it was worked. Food was no longer only found in changing patterns of wild plants and animals. It was also planned, planted, protected, and stored. Hunger still mattered, but its meaning changed. A hungry body might no longer look first toward animal tracks, fruiting trees, river edges, shell beds, or distant paths. It might look toward a field, a storehouse, a grinding stone, a herd, a basket, a wall, or a season of labor already begun months before. This was a new kind of survival. It required patience, memory, discipline, cooperation, and a different attention to time. The body had to learn the rhythm of planting and harvest, the weight of repeated work, the danger of failed crops, the importance of storage, and the pressure of living close to more people. In the deep beginning of human life, movement was often part of the answer to change. If food became scarce in one place, a group might move depending on knowledge, season, territory, and relationships with others. With settled life, movement became less simple. Fields could not be carried away. Stored food had to be guarded. Houses, tools, animals, graves, paths, and neighbors tied people more strongly to place. This gave stability, but it also created new risks. A bad season could threaten many people at once. Stored grain could be lost, stolen, spoiled, or controlled. Living close to animals and larger numbers of humans could change patterns of disease. More permanent settlements could create new kinds of conflict, duty, inequality, and dependence. The ancient body was still the same human body, but the environment pressing on it was different. Instead of reading only wild signs, people had to read fields, weather, soil, pests, water, labor, property, and social rules. Instead of following the wide memory of a moving landscape, people also had to follow the narrow memory of a planted place. This does not mean farming made humans simply weaker or worse. Agriculture allowed populations to grow, supported larger communities, made new crafts possible, and changed the scale of human culture. But it also asked the body to adapt to a more controlled and more demanding world. Survival instinct did not vanish. It was redirected. The alertness once used to notice animal movement could become alertness to crop failure, theft, drought, storage, and the behavior of neighbors. The social instincts once used in smaller groups now had to operate in denser communities where not everyone was kin or deeply familiar. The hunger signal once connected to landscape search could become connected to work, grain, ownership, debt, or obligation. The need for safety could move from open camp, fire, and shared watch toward walls, houses, boundaries, and rules. This was a profound turn. Humans were still ancient bodies, but they were beginning to live inside systems that were less like the environments in which many older instincts had been trained. The world was becoming more predictable in some ways, and more complicated in others. A person could sleep closer to stored food, but also closer to more people, more waste, more animals, more rules, and more pressures that did not come from weather alone. The survival instinct remained, listening as it always had. But now it had to listen to a different kind of danger. When people began to live around fields, herds, houses, and stored food, survival did not become easy. It became organized in a different way. The body no longer listened only for the movement of animals, the ripening of wild plants, the sound of water, or the sudden change in weather over open ground. It also had to listen to planted seasons, crowded homes, stored grain, ownership, neighbours, sickness, work, and rules. The old instincts were not removed from the body. They were turned toward a new landscape made partly by human hands. A person still needed food, warmth, sleep, safety, belonging, and warning. But the sources of those needs were changing. The field became a place of hope and fear. It could feed many people, but only if rain, soil, seeds, labour, tools, storage, and protection worked together. A crop growing well could calm hunger before harvest arrived. A crop failing could create fear long before stomachs were empty. In a foraging life, danger might appear as distance, scarcity, exposure, or an animal too costly to follow. In a settled life, danger could appear as a dry sky, insects in grain, illness moving from house to house, a boundary dispute, a broken tool, a debt, a theft, or a storehouse running low. The nervous system still watched for threat, but threat now had more human forms. It could come through social pressure, obligation, hierarchy, or the fear that what had been stored would not be enough. Hunger itself changed shape. Once, hunger often pulled people outward, towards search and movement. In farming communities, hunger could pull people inward, toward counting, guarding, grinding, rationing, and waiting. A family might know there was food nearby, yet still have to protect it for months. The body might want to eat now, while the household knew that the stored grain had to last through winter, drought, tax, or poor harvest. This created a different kind of restraint. Ancient instincts of appetite, sharing, caution, and anxiety had to live beside long planning. Food became not only something found and eaten, but something owned, measured, stored, exchanged, and sometimes controlled by others. Safety also changed. A small moving group might depend on closeness, watchfulness, and knowledge of a wider landscape. A village depended on closeness too, but in a denser way. More people meant more cooperation, but also more conflict. More bodies meant more help, but also more chances for disease. More stored goods meant more security, but also more reasons for protection and dispute. The body still read faces, tones, gestures, and trust. But now there were more relationships to manage. Not everyone nearby was equally familiar. Not every rule came from kinship or direct experience. The ancient social instincts had to stretch into a larger human world. This is one reason the shift toward farming and settled life was not a simple story of progress or loss. It was a reorganization of survival. Many old dangers became less constant, while new pressures became more constant. People could invest in place, build houses, develop crafts, raise children near stored food, and create lasting communities. At the same time, they could become tied to harvest failure, hard labor, crowding, disease, inequality, and the demands of property. The body that once read animal trails now also had to read human systems. It had to sense not only where food might be, but who controlled it. Not only where water flowed, but whose field needed it. Not only whether the night was safe, but whether the community itself was stable. The ancient instincts remained active, but the world they faced had become more layered. Survival was no longer only a conversation with land, weather, animals, and the group. It was also a conversation with storage, ownership, labor, settlement, and time measured in harvests. It would be too simple to say that settled life made humans lose their survival instincts. It would also be too simple to say that farming only made people safer. The truth is quieter. The human body carried old reactions into a new arrangement, and that arrangement rewarded different kinds of attention. A person still needed to notice cold, hunger, illness, trust, fatigue, danger, and the needs of children. But many of those signals now pass through fields, houses, stores of food, fences, work schedules, animals kept near people, and larger communities. The body did not become detached from survival. It became attached to new forms of survival. A tired back after repeated labor, a fear of a poor harvest, worry over stored grain, unease about neighbors, concern for animals, attention to water channels, repair of walls, tools, and roofs. All of these could carry the weight that animal tracks, wild plants, and moving camps had carried before. This was still survival, but it was survival in a more constructed world. The ancient body had to live inside a system that humans themselves had made, and once made could not easily leave. This is a deep pattern in human history. Each success creates a new dependence. Fire gave warmth but required fuel and care. Tools extended the hand but required skill and repair. Agriculture increased food in some ways but tied people to seasons, fields, storage, and labor. Settlement gave shelter and continuity but tied people to crowding, waste, disease, boundaries, and social obligation. None of these changes were simply good or bad. They were trade-offs. They show that humans did not walk out of nature into comfort in one clean step. They built new environments, then had to survive inside them. The question of lost instinct becomes clearer here. Many ancient responses were not erased. They were redirected until their original shape became harder to see. The instinct to seek food became tied to crops, stores, work, and ownership. The instinct to belong became tied to larger communities, rules, status, and reputation. The instinct to watch for danger became tied not only to animals, weather, and darkness, but to debt, conflict, disease, scarcity, and the decisions of other people. The instinct to rest became complicated by work that had to be finished before rain, harvest, cold, or social demand. The body still spoke, but the world around it answered with systems. In the deep beginning of human life, the environment was not simple, but it was more directly sensed. Hunger pointed toward land, cold pointed toward shelter, fire, and bodies nearby. Darkness pointed toward listening and closeness. With settlement, these signals had more layers between feeling and answer. Hunger could point toward a locked storehouse. Cold could point toward house repair or fuel supply. Fear could point toward the stability of the village, the health of animals, or the power of people who controlled food. The nervous system was still ancient, but the problems were becoming social, economic, and built into place. This is why the story is not that humans became weak. It is that humans became surrounded by their own solutions. Those solutions protected life, but they also changed the training ground of instinct. The body had to care about harvests it could not fully control, stored food it could not always reach, neighbors it could not always trust, and rules it did not create alone. A wild sign could be read through the senses. A social system often had to be read through memory, obligation, fear, and expectation. That is a heavier, less visible kind of survival. Modern life continues this pattern. We still live inside systems built to protect us, and we still feel ancient signals moving through them. The body asks for food, warmth, rest, safety, closeness, and meaning. The world answers with schedules, markets, passwords, laws, bills, walls, devices, and institutions. The old instincts are not gone. They are living inside structures too complex for the ancient body to read easily. If ancient survival instincts had truly disappeared, the modern body would feel very different. It would not tighten at a sudden sound before the mind understood it. It would not wake in the dark and listen for a moment before returning to sleep. It would not look toward movement at the edge of vision, or feel uneasy when a familiar place becomes strangely quiet. It would not seek warmth with such deep relief, or feel calmer near a trusted voice, or become restless when separated from people who matter. These responses are still here. They rise quietly through ordinary life, sometimes so quickly that we only notice them after they have already begun. A door closes somewhere in the night, and the body listens. A shadow moves across a wall, and the eyes return to it. A person stands too close, and the skin seems to know before thought does. A child cries and attention turns. Food smells warm, and the body leans toward it. Cold air touches the face, and the shoulders draw in. These are not perfect guides, and they are not proof of some lost ancient wisdom. They are traces of older systems that helped human beings notice, attach, avoid harm, conserve energy, and stay close to safety. The body has not forgotten everything. It still carries patterns shaped by a long history in which survival depended on attention before explanation. Some of these patterns are very old, older than farming, older than cities, older than language in its modern form. The startle response, the fear of falling, the pull toward caregivers, the tendency to notice faces and eyes, the discomfort of isolation, the need for sleep, the search for warmth, the caution around unfamiliar sounds, all belong to deep layers of animal and human life. But in humans, they were joined to culture, memory, tools, and group knowledge. That is why the modern body can feel an ancient reaction without knowing how to use it in an ancient way. A person may become alert in darkness, but not know how to read the night. A person may feel hunger, but not know how to read season, soil, tracks, or water. A person may feel loneliness, but not live inside a small group where belonging is renewed through daily labor and shared risk. The instinct remains, but the old context is missing. This is one reason ancient survival instincts can feel confusing now. They are not gone, yet they do not always fit. The body may react strongly to a noise that is only a refrigerator, a pipe, a car outside, or a phone alert. It may feel social danger from a message, a silence, or a look, even when the body is physically safe. It may seek food in response to stress, tiredness, or habit, not only true need. It may feel restless indoors, drawn toward outside air, firelight, water, walking, or living things, without being able to explain why. These are not signs that the body is foolish. They are signs that the body is old. It was shaped across environments where sound, hunger, warmth, darkness, and belonging were tied closely to consequence. Modern life has changed the consequences faster than the deep body could fully change its language. In the beginning of human life, a warning usually asked for action: listen, move closer, share warmth, save energy, watch the sky, repair the shelter, follow the track, stay with the group. Today, many warnings have no clear ancient action left. The sound is not danger. The hunger is not famine. The darkness is inside a locked room. The loneliness is inside a crowded world. The body still speaks, but the world around it gives different answers. This is why the story cannot be that survival instincts disappeared. A more careful truth is that many of them remain, but they are living in a place where their old meanings have become harder to hear. The problem is not that ancient responses are always wrong. The problem is that they can arrive in a world that no longer matches the one that shaped them. A sudden sound once deserved attention because sound could carry information before sight confirmed it. Today, the same tightening of the body may happen because a phone vibrates, a door closes in another apartment, a pipe shifts in a wall, or a vehicle passes outside. The muscles prepare before the mind has judged the source. The body is doing something old, but the situation is new. In the same way, a person may feel uneasy in darkness, even when the room is locked, warm, and safe. The ancient body knows that low visibility changes what can be known. It does not immediately understand that walls, electricity, and modern shelter have changed the meaning of that darkness. Hunger can also become confused. In an older setting, hunger often led the body towards search, memory, movement, sharing, and careful judgment of energy. In a modern setting, hunger may appear among stress, boredom, tiredness, advertising, habit, or the easy presence of food. The signal is real, but the environment around it has become crowded with new cues. This is why old instincts can sometimes feel misplaced. They are not useless, but they are no longer always precise. A response shaped for one kind of world may still rise in another, like a hand reaching for a tool that is no longer there. The need for belonging shows this very clearly. For most of human time, being separated from familiar people could carry serious risk. A person outside the group could lose information, protection, food, warmth, help during injury, and safety during sleep. The body learned to treat social distance as important. Today, a person can be physically safe and still feel deep distress from silence, rejection, exclusion, or a message left unanswered. The nervous system may respond as if something essential has been threatened, because in the older world, social threat and survival threat were often closer together. Modern life has separated them in many situations, but the body does not always make that separation quickly. The same pattern appears with fatigue. In a foraging or early agricultural setting, tiredness could be a guide. It might tell a person to slow down before judgment failed, to save strength before travel, to rest before cold, to notice hunger, illness, or overwork. Today, fatigue often meets clocks, obligations, lights, screens, and schedules that continue regardless of what the body says. The old signal still asks for rest, but the modern system may answer with more stimulation, more work, or a delayed sleep. Over time, the body's warnings can become blurred, ignored, or mistrusted. This does not mean the body is primitive in a foolish way. It means it is carrying ancient priorities into conditions that have changed very quickly in historical terms. Safety no longer always comes from reading weather, staying near the fire, noticing tracks, or listening with the group. It may come from medicine, law, money, housing, transport, refrigeration, passwords, institutions, and electrical systems. These protections are powerful, but they often speak through abstract signals rather than sensory ones. The ancient body may not feel reassured by a system it cannot touch, smell, hear, or see clearly. So it keeps searching for older forms of certainty, warmth, closeness, rhythm, familiar voices, visible shelter, darkness that feels calm rather than empty, food that feels connected to care. The mismatch can make old instincts appear at the wrong time, or grow quiet when they might still help. We may ignore true fatigue, but we may feel lonely in a crowd, hungry without need, safe without ease, or restless without a visible danger. These are not simple failures. They are signs of a body speaking an ancient language inside a modern room. The modern human body is not empty of instinct. It is crowded with old signals, old sensitivities, and old ways of preparing for the world. What has changed is the fit between those signals and the world around them. A body can still wake before the alarm because light, sound, temperature, worry, or memory have already begun to stir it. It can still feel relief near warmth, still relax at a familiar voice, still turn toward movement, still feel uneasy when a place is too silent, too exposed, or too unfamiliar. These are not complete survival skills by themselves. They are beginnings. They are small openings of attention. In the older world, those openings were often followed by practice. A sound led to listening. Listening led to interpretation. Interpretation led to movement, warning, stillness, or memory. A cold wind led to shelter, fire, covering, and closeness. Hunger led to search, restraint, sharing, or planning. Fear of isolation led the body back toward people who carried knowledge and protection. In modern life, the same openings often stop early. A sound is dismissed. Cold is covered. Hunger is answered quickly. Loneliness is pushed into distraction. Fatigue is postponed. The body speaks, but the conversation ends before it becomes a skill. This is why the ancient survival system is neither gone nor fully alive in the old way. It remains as a set of tendencies waiting for a world that rarely appears. The nervous system still expects meaning from darkness, but darkness is often removed. It still expects food to have a path, a season, a memory, and a cost, but food may arrive without any visible connection to land. It still expects safety to be felt through known people nearby, but safety is often handled by systems, documents, walls, and devices. It still expects discomfort to be useful information, but modern comfort can erase discomfort before the body has learned anything from it. This does not make modern life wrong. Many of these protections are merciful. They reduce dangers that once took lives quietly and often. Warm rooms, clean water, stored food, medicine, light and secure shelter are real achievements. The important point is more careful. A protected body is not the same as a trained body. A protected body can survive many dangers because the environment has been built to absorb them. A trained body survives by reading, responding, remembering, and cooperating. Modern people often have more protection and less training in the older sense. The ancient body remains inside that protection, carrying instincts that sometimes become faint because they are not used, and sometimes become loud because they no longer know where to go. A person may feel restless without danger because the body once used restlessness to prepare for movement. A person may feel alert in a safe room because the body once treated night as a condition to be monitored. A person may long for walking, fire, water, trees, tools, or shared silence because those things once gave the senses a world they could understand directly. These longings should not be turned into a simple command to return to the past. The past was not gentle. It held hunger, injury, disease, cold, loss, and uncertainty. But the past can still teach us something about the body we carry now. It can remind us that instinct is not only a primitive leftover. It is a form of relationship. It grows stronger when the body meets real signals, real limits, real care, real effort, and real attention. Perhaps the question is not whether modern humans have lost their instincts completely. Perhaps the deeper question is how many of those instincts are still present, waiting beneath comfort, with fewer chances to become useful. By the time we reach the modern room, the ancient body has already travelled through many worlds. It has passed through cold nights, hungry seasons, darkness, firelight, voices, tools, shelters, fields, villages, walls, roads, and systems too large for the senses to follow. It has learned to survive by listening to skin, stomach, ears, eyes, memory, and other people. It has also learned to survive by placing more and more of its danger outside itself into fire, clothing, houses, stored food, laws, machines, medicine, and the long, invisible networks that hold daily life together. The question of lost survival instincts becomes clearer when all of these changes are seen together. Cold once taught the skin to read wind, dampness, fuel, shelter, and the weakness of the body before morning. Hunger once taught the stomach to think beyond itself, towards season, distance, plants, animals, water, and the needs of the group. Darkness once taught the nervous system to slow down, listen, remember space, stay near warmth, and respect what could not be seen. Small sounds, smells, and traces once taught attention to move carefully through uncertainty. Social life once taught the body that belonging was not only emotional but practical, because knowledge, warning, food, warmth, care, and sleep were held between people. Childhood once taught survival through slow observation, through hands, feet, play, correction, and repeated contact with the living world. Tools extended the body, but also began moving some of survival into objects. Agriculture and settlement created new safety, new dependence, and new kinds of danger that came from storage, labor, disease, ownership, and larger communities. None of these changes erased the ancient body. They changed the world that trained it. This is why the loss was not a single event. There was no morning when humans woke up without instinct. Instead, the signals became quieter because the environment answered them sooner, or answered them in a different language. Cold became a blanket, a wall, a switch. Hunger became a shelf, a schedule, a purchase. Darkness became a lamp. Distance became a road. Memory became a map. Trust became a system. Warning became an alarm. These answers are powerful and often merciful. They protect life in ways our ancestors would have deeply valued, but they also shorten the old path between feeling and understanding. The body feels and the world solves. The body warns and a device responds. The body asks for closeness and a message appears. The body seeks direction and a screen points the way. Survival becomes safer, but less directly practiced. Beneath this change, the beginning of human life still leaves traces. A person may stand near fire and feel the body settle. They may hear rain at night and feel strangely calm behind a roof. They may walk under trees and feel attention soften. They may feel hunger sharpen thought, darkness alter hearing, a familiar voice calm the chest, or cold air wake the skin. These small moments do not return anyone to the ancient world. They only reveal that the body still recognizes some of the old materials. Fire, water, ground, weather, night, food, movement, touch, and trusted people are not decorative details around human life. They are part of the deep grammar through which the body learned survival. Modern comfort can hide that grammar, but it cannot completely remove it. The ancient instinct is not a lost treasure buried cleanly in the past. It is more like a language we still speak with an accent we no longer fully understand. Some words remain clear, some have changed meaning, some come out only in silence, fatigue, fear, hunger, warmth, or the need to be near another human being. And if we want to understand what was lost, we first have to see what is still quietly here. There is a quiet value in understanding the ancient body without judging it too quickly. Many modern people think of their bodies as inconvenient, restless, easily tired, too hungry, too alert at night, too sensitive to loneliness, or too drawn toward warmth and comfort. But the body was not shaped only for comfort. It was shaped to keep a living person connected to the conditions of survival. It learned to notice need before the mind could explain it. It learned to pull attention toward food, shelter, danger, care, rest, and belonging. When those signals appear in modern life, they may feel misplaced, but they are not meaningless. They are reminders that the body is older than the room it lives in. To understand this is not to reject modern life. It is to see modern life more clearly. A warm house, clean water, medicine, stored food, electric light, safe sleep, and protection from weather are real achievements. They have spared people from suffering that our ancestors knew too well. But these achievements do not cancel the older needs of the nervous system. A body still needs darkness that feels calm enough for sleep. It still needs movement that lets muscles, joints, lungs, and balance remember their purpose. It still needs food that is not only available, but understood as care and nourishment. It still needs other people, not only as names on a screen, but as voices, faces, trust, and presence. It still needs moments when the senses meet the real world without too many layers between them and the air. This is where the lesson becomes useful. We do not need to return to ancient hardship in order to respect ancient design. We do not need cold nights without shelter to remember that the body benefits from fresh air, changing temperature, and sleep protected from artificial brightness. We do not need hunger and scarcity to remember that food once had timing, effort, sharing, and attention around it. We do not need danger and darkness to remember that the evening can be slower than the day. We do not need to live in a small band to remember that isolation can weigh on the body in ways logic alone may not fix. The ancient beginning of human life can teach a gentler form of attention. It can teach us to ask what a signal is trying to protect before we silence it. Fatigue may be asking for rest, not failure. Restlessness may be asking for movement, not distraction. Loneliness may be asking for real contact, not endless noise. Unease at night may be asking for rhythm, darkness, and safety, not more stimulation. Hunger may be asking not only for calories, but for steadiness, care, and a return to the body's own timing. These are not medical rules, and they should not be turned into strict commands. They are only a way of listening. The deeper educational value is humility. The modern human body is not a broken machine. It is a historical body. It carries traces of forests, plains, coasts, fires, shelters, long walks, shared meals, children watching adults, elders remembering seasons, and quiet nights where listening mattered. When we understand that, we may become less angry with ourselves. We may stop treating every old signal as an enemy. Some signals may be outdated in their exact form, but they still point toward real human needs. The question is not how to become ancient again. The question is, how to live in modern safety without forgetting the basic conditions that made the body feel at home in the world. Sleep, movement, light, darkness, warmth, food, touch, trust, patience, and time. Perhaps this is the most useful thing ancient survival can still give us. Not a return to danger, but a calmer respect for the quiet wisdom still moving under the skin. Maybe the deepest loss was not a single instinct, but a relationship. The body did not simply forget how to survive. The world around it changed so completely that many old responses no longer had the same place to go. Cold still touches the skin, but walls and heat answer before the body has to read wind, fuel, dampness, and shared warmth. Hunger still rises from inside, but food often appears without season, search, distance, or the memory of those who knew the land. Darkness still changes the mind, but light can erase it before the ears, memory, and patience learn what night is trying to teach. A sudden sound still tightens the muscles, but the sound may belong to pipes, engines, machines, or a phone, not to a living sign beyond a fire. Loneliness still weighs on the chest, but the modern world can surround a person with names, messages, streets, and systems while leaving the older body uncertain about who is truly near. In the beginning, human survival was not stored only in the brain. It was spread across the senses, the group, the landscape, the fire, the tools, the seasons, the memories of elders, and the slow learning of children. It was a web of attention. The body felt, the world answered, and the group helped interpret the answer. Over time, human beings built stronger answers. We built shelters against cold, storage against hunger, lamps against darkness, roads against distance, laws against violence, medicine against disease, and systems against many forms of uncertainty. These achievements are real. They are part of the same human story as stone tools and fire. But every answer that protects us also changes what we practice. A body that never has to read the night becomes less fluent in darkness. A body that rarely searches for food loses many of the meanings hunger once carried. A child protected from soil, flame, weather, animals, and long distance still learns deeply, but learns from a different world. A person kept safe by invisible systems may live longer, yet still feel an old unease that those systems cannot fully soothe. So perhaps the ancient instincts were not destroyed, perhaps they were covered by comfort, by walls, by screens, by constant light, by stored food, by schedules, by noise, by tools so powerful that the body no longer has to ask the old questions every day. Underneath, the questions remain quiet. Where is warmth? Who is near? Is the night safe? What does hunger mean? Which sound matters? When should I rest? What does this place ask of me? These questions once guided human beings through landscapes where survival was uncertain and attention had value. Today, they may return as small feelings we do not always understand: restlessness, longing, alertness, unease, comfort near fire, calm near water, relief in a trusted voice, the strange peace of walking under open sky. They are not instructions to abandon the modern world. They are reminders that the body still belongs to history. It carries the memory of a time when survival was not separate from the earth underfoot, the people nearby, and the slow turning of day into night. If there is a lesson here, it is not that we should become ancient again. It is that we can live more gently with the ancient body we still have. We can give it darkness that feels safe, movement that feels real, food that carries care, silence that is not empty, contact that is not shallow, and time that is not always broken into alarms. We can respect old signals without obeying them blindly. We can listen without fear. And in that listening, the final question remains open, as quietly as it began. If the instincts are not truly gone, but only sleeping beneath the world we built, what would it take for the human body to hear them again?